When the final season of DuckTales started, the show's creators were quick to tell fans that Season 3 was all about legacy. And not just the legacy of the original 1987 DuckTales series, but the legacy of all the classic 1990s Disney afternoon shows together. Co-executive producer and story editor Frank Angones specifically said that the abundance of Disney afternoon characters showing up in Season 3 wasn't an accident, but part of a larger meta-story for something they wanted to say about the original DuckTales and the legacy of Disney's iconic afternoon programming block. With Season 3 marking the end of the series, however, that means that DuckTales is tasked with making sure its final stories pay respect both to the legacy of the shows that came before it, and finalize the legacy that it will leave behind itself. Let's talk about an episode that does a little of both. This is The Lost Cargo of Kit Cloudkicker. The creators of Disney's new DuckTales series may have said that Season 3 is specifically about legacy, but for anyone paying attention, it's been clear that the legacy of the Disney.comics, Disney TV animation, the Disney Afternoon cartoon block, and the original DuckTales has been a big part of the show's DNA from the very beginning. From the very first season of Disney's new DuckTales series, the DuckTales crew made a point of building off ideas from the original DuckTales show and the Disney Afternoon, just in case the show never got renewed for a second season. Back then, though, most of those references were pretty subtle. Maybe a story based off of a key element of the Gummy Bears, or a Darkwing Duck TV show playing in the background at Launchpad's place. These Easter eggs were enough to flesh the world out and pay respect to the Disney animated TV programs that came before them and help make the new DuckTales possible. But over time, those references became a bigger part of the story, allowing new, fully fledged versions of those classic Disney afternoon characters to find their way into this new, fun little shared universe that DuckTales was building. Of all those classic Disney shows, however, the first one to cross over in a significant way wasn't Darkwing Duck, the show with the most direct ties to the original DuckTales, but TaleSpin, introducing Don Carnage as a villain way back in Season 1. And while Don Carnage is very much the same kind of egotistical, over-the-top bad guy in DuckTales that he was in the original TaleSpin cartoon, the same can't be said about this episode's guest star, Kit Cloudkicker.
Whoa! I cannot believe that worked! Who's the terrible pilot now, everyone?
In the original TaleSpin, Kit Cloudkicker was the show's main kid sidekick. A clever, funny, upbeat character who served as the perfect analog for the children watching the show itself. He filled the same narrative role as Huey, Dewey, and Louie in the original DuckTales, giving viewers a place where they could see themselves in the world of the show. The new DuckTales asks what would have happened to this character if he grew up. And the answer is both exactly what you'd expect, and also maybe not quite what it seems. The show opens with Kit flying the Sea Duck, Baloo's plane from the original TaleSpin series, running away from Don Carnage and a group of sky pirates, seemingly showing us a kid sidekick who grew up to eventually replace his mentor. That might seem like the obvious character growth direction for Kit, who, in the original TaleSpin, was never shy about telling Baloo that he wanted to learn to fly and be a pilot. But that's not quite the whole story. We'll get to that in a bit, though. Before we can seriously talk about Kit, we have to figure out why we're talking about Kit. It's because it turns out he was the last person to see one of the missing mysteries in Isabella Finch's journal.
The next missing mystery is the Stone of What Was. The good news is someone already found it. The bad news is that it was foul.
Oh no!
But the better news is that they lost it years ago.
Gasp! What a roller coaster!
It turns out Kit Cloudkicker was hired by Fowl to deliver the Stone of What Was, but it was lost during a battle with Don Carnage's sky pirates. Della, Dewey, and Huey are there to investigate, where they find a familiar-looking plane, piloted by a familiar-looking bear from a familiar company.
Hire for hire.
A cargo company started by legendary pilot Baloo von Bruenwald and his team, now run by his radical sidekick turned super dependable pilot, me, Kit Cloudkicker.
It turns out that Della knows Kit from flight school, although she doesn't exactly remember him being a very good pilot. That's actually really important, but before we get to that, I want to talk about the larger story of this episode. Or rather, I want to talk about how we're not going to talk about the larger story of this episode. Not because of spoilers or anything, but just because this is one of those DuckTales stories where I think what the characters are doing is so much more interesting than the story itself. But that said, the story does matter. So let's hit the highlights really quick. Della, Dewey, and Huey show up in Cape Suzette to hire Kit to fly them to where he last saw the Stone of What Was, only to discover it on a remote island populated by creatures that are a mix of multiple animals. Believe it or not, this is actually a reference to the Wuzzles, one of the very first cartoons produced by Disney Television Animation. Although, in that series, the creatures are friendly, funny animal cartoon types, not intimidating monsters. As it turns out, the Stone of What Was can merge two creatures into one, which creates the Wuzzle monsters that they find on the island. And Della and the kids aren't the only people looking for this magical stone either. Fowl hired Don Carnage to recover it from the island for them, and the two groups fight over the mystic item for pretty much the entire episode. What wins the day, however, and the Stone of What Was, isn't action, but character growth. So let's talk about Dewey Duck and Kit Cloudkicker. Throughout DuckTales, Dewey's been on a mission to stand out, prove himself, and find what makes him special. It's a trait that often has him running into danger without considering the consequences, and assuming that he's already great at things he's never tried. This makes him refuse to do anything carefully and correctly. Dewey is so eager to find that he has some special, magical, natural talent for something that he's always trying to skip putting in the hard work to learn a talent that will actually make him special. So when this episode opens and he's getting pilot lessons from his mother, he's unimpressed.
You're keeping a plane this size steady with all that wind resistance. I mean, look at this! Yeah! Just keep it steady.
Flying a plane actually takes some considerable talent, but holding a large aircraft steady and landing it safely doesn't leave a lot of room for showboating. It lacks flair, and Dewey loves flair. So when he sees a video of young Kit literally cloud kicking by riding a foldable airfoil in the sky, he immediately gets obsessed.
Now this is special.
This brings us back to Kit. Back in the original TaleSpin, he was everything Dewey wants to be. The cool, wisecracking kid with a special flashy talent that could swoop in and save the day. Kit would jump out of airplanes and ride on the clouds, like a wakeboarder in the sky. But to him, this was just something he did. Kit really just wanted to grow up and be a pilot, like his mentor Baloo. And it seems like he did.
I grew out of that cloud kicking stuff. Besides, I became a pilot, an ace pilot. That's me, an ace pilot.
As Kit grew into an adult, he tried to become more like Baloo, his mentor. All he needed was a kid sidekick of his own.
Every ace pilot could use a showboating, catchphrasing, cloud-kicking sidekick.
We'll be just like me and Baloo, only you're the me! Think you can Dewey it? Which I assume is both your name and a catchphrase?
Yep.
Dewey is more than happy to fill that role. There's just one problem. Dewey is terrible at cloud kicking. And as we find out through the course of the episode, Kit isn't that great of a pilot either.
Who is flying the plane?
Relax, my co-pilot is all over it.
There's a lot that can be said here about managing your expectations as you get older in life, and making sure you're doing things for the right reasons. Kit seemed to want to grow up to be like Baloo, and forced his life to be on a path to mirror someone he admired. But he didn't grow up to be that person he admired. Dewey, on the other hand, has always been looking for something to make him special, but he's always too focused on the goal of becoming special to get serious about developing a talent that'll really get him there. And the two of them realize this at almost the exact same time, with a little help from Huey.
Listen, kid, I gave up the thing I was special at because I thought I was expected to do something else. But if you're great at something, you gotta hold on to that, because brother, you are not great at cloud kicking.
And you are great at flying. The thing you're great at is special because you're the one that's doing it.
Once these two characters realize that their destiny isn't necessarily tied to what they feel they're supposed to do, but rather the things that they're actually good at, everything changes. Kit gets back on his airfoil and saves the day, just like when he was a kid sidekick. And that's a lot of fun, but it's not the most interesting part of the episode to me. Dewey's attitude is. As the group flies off to rescue Della, who's trapped on the back of a butterfly bear beast, Dewey changes from a showboating kid sidekick to a more serious adventurer. He doesn't have time for jokes or one-liners or for showing off with flourish. He needs to fly the plane, keep it steady, and rescue his mom.
Ah, yeah! I knew you could do it!
Settle down, Huey. This is no time for showboating. I gotta save Mom.
It's a change in his demeanor so huge, he even drops his catchphrase.
Okay, let's do it.
Not Dewey it, just let's do it. As the episode closes, he kind of keeps this changed attitude too, realizing at the end he doesn't need to find something special to show off how great he's supposed to be, but that he can make whatever he does special by putting in the hard work and effort.
I gotta admit, I think I finally figured out my thing. To become a fully fledged pilot, I can make flying as special as I am.
Oh, I'm so glad it wasn't cloud kicking. No offense, you're an artist.
The more I think about this episode, the more I like that it carves out a future for Dewey. It's true, Season 3 of DuckTales is tied to the theme of legacy. And while a big part of that theme is the legacy of shows like The Wuzzles and TaleSpin, the original Darkwing Duck, Goof Troop, The Gummy Bears, the 1987 DuckTales series, and other classic Disney television animation, the legacy of the new DuckTales series itself is just as important. And by giving Dewey a defined life goal, it's doing its part to do something many of those old series never did. Give its characters a future. As a kid, Huey, Dewey, and Louie were some of my favorite characters in DuckTales, as were most of the other kid-age characters on the Disney afternoon shows. But they were always perpetually children who would never grow up. They were never really given clear life goals, and it was hard to imagine those characters as they might grow up to be as adults. The shows themselves even seem to have a hard time imagining this. The rare episodes that might flash forward or time travel to the future and show them as adults didn't always deliver a realistic view of who they might become. This episode does, and it does it 3 times. Not only giving us a realistic idea of what Kit and Molly from the original TaleSpin might have turned out like if they grew up, but also laying out a path for Dewey's future. Before, we might have imagined Dewey as bouncing from fad to fad his whole life, trying to reach some unclear fame for being special. But now we can see a young boy with a vision for who he wants to become, and a realistic idea of how he can actually get there. I also like that we saw Kit as a version of what Dewey might have become without that vision. Unfocused, disorganized, lazy, and ultimately not all that happy with who he became. But by the end of the episode, they still showed him as someone who could turn his life around and find a new direction in life that will make him happy. I think that's a positive message for everyone. Is that a lot to take in from a simple crossover adventure between the new DuckTales and a Disney afternoon classic? Yeah, maybe it is, but I still like to think that part of the legacy that DuckTales is leaving behind is one of looking forward to the future, rather than leaving us to merely guess at what tomorrow might bring. That's all for my thoughts on this episode. There were also a lot of other fun jokes here and visual gags, not to mention some great story parallels to TaleSpin's opening pilot episodes in this story. And I liked all of that a lot too, but it was the change in Dewey's character that stood out to me the most. And I'm looking forward to seeing how the rest of the show wraps up the other characters' arcs before the series finale. As always though, thanks for watching and sticking with me through all these years of DuckTales reviews, and I hope you'll stick around for whatever comes next from me and this YouTube channel. Until then, take it easy, Internet.